sitting in my apartment in Newton, Massachusetts in 1968, and I had this urge to look at the beginning of Genesis in Hebrew, which was a strange urge considering the fact that I didn't read Hebrew, although I did know the alphabet. Now, I have one talent in this world, and that is I'm a visual pattern recognizer. It maybe has become evident already. And my eyes fell on the letters. And I could not get it out of my head that there was something peculiar about the sequence of letters. It just didn't look like language to me. Since I couldn't read it, that was a further reason why it didn't look like language. If it had looked like language, if I had been a good student in my earlier days and had learned to read Hebrew, I would have, just like you pick up a piece of paper in any language, you don't start counting letters and look at letter patterns. You simply read what's said there. And I never would have seen this. So I asked around, assuming that Genesis was the most heavily researched document going, and people told me they didn't know what I was talking about. I asked a rabbi, I asked a priest, I went over to MIT, I went over to Harvard, nothing. Eventually people told me this must be Kabbalah, it must be Hebrew mysticism. Well, I'd never heard of Kabbalah, so I decided I'd better get educated if I was going to figure out what was going on here. And I realized that if no one knew about this, and there really was some kind of coding in the letters of the text of Genesis, then this could be very important. And we'll see why that may be. So I read just about everything I could find in English on Kabbalah. I read Hebrew material, I read Christian material, I read Arabic material, I read Greek material, the Pythagorean mysticism, I read some Eastern material. I read stuff printed in green ink from people who'd been up in flying saucers. I read stuff written by very conservative rabbis who really didn't like to write anything down at all and say as little as possible. And I started to put together a sense that even though I couldn't figure out what they were talking about, it was very nice poetry, and yes, there might very well be meditations involved. The literary criticism methods that the academic scholars used to make sense of Kabbalistic texts didn't do much for me. Yes, I could see you can compare this sentence to that sentence, but that didn't tell me anything about what the author was saying. It just told me he was saying the same thing here as here. And eventually, after 10 years, I started to build up a sense that these Kabbalistic texts were talking about something. There was just too many details for it to be pulled out of the air. There was just too much commonality to be these texts to be the individual experiences of mystics. There was something that bound it all together. And it didn't matter if I was reading Rosicrucian material or reading Sanskrit material in English translation. Or Hebrew material. It all seemed to have the same underpinning. And many others have claimed this too. There are numerous teachers over the centuries who claim the same thing. But I wasn't satisfied by them simply telling me it was all the same. It didn't look the same, it just felt the same. So the idea was to find out what was going on.